So we're going to be talking about strategies and tactics for connecting with both connected and disconnected consumers, which we'll be getting into. A lot of the things that Martin has just explained to you are spot on. And one of the most important things you can have in your professional life is validation from somebody who really knows what they're talking about. In some ways, though, we're going to go a little bit deeper on some of those issues that he raised and sort of get into some of the more practical ways that you can apply them in your businesses. But before we get there, we have to talk about the nature of shopping very, very quickly. Why are we talking about widely distributed offices? Consumers. We're doing it because shopping has historically been a focused effort. It was something that you had to actually go and do. You would have to take some time out of the day and go to a store and pick something off of the shelf. You would have to go to a special part of town to pick up and buy what you wanted. It was something that you were either doing because you had to do it or doing it because there was an urgency to it, unless, of course, you wanted to shop, at which point it was something that you wanted to do, right? But today, shopping can happen pretty much anywhere, and it does. So we talk about it being a widely distributed shopping environment, not because there's fewer people in retail, but because shoppers are doing it differently than they used to. Shoppers are able to shop whenever they want to. They're able to shop when it makes sense for them. They're able to do it while they're doing something else. And that's a very, very different behavior. And one of the keys to keep in mind as we talk about as we have our conversation today is to talk about how this connected, disconnected consumer is still there for you, and they still want to buy your products, but then it's up to you to figure out how to engage them. So we're going to talk about how you can set your company up and your brand up to be able to do this, because you're in a brand building environment and in a retail environment where retailers and brands are no longer in control, which I think is one of Martin's important points. So our conversation today is going to go into 5 areas. First, we're going to talk about this retail apocalypse, and Martin made reference to that earlier. We're going to go a little bit deeper into that. I think that is largely a made-up phenomenon. 2, we're going to talk about model innovation, and how model innovation is probably more valuable to your business than channel innovation, which is something you're probably pretty familiar with. 3, we're going to talk about the future of search, and this is going to be an important one because search is everything today, more than ever before. 4, we're going to talk about radical personalization, and we'll discuss why I'm even using the words radical. And then finally, we're going to talk about the path through purchase, which is a very different way of looking at business than the path to purchase. So, this retail apocalypse. I went to Google, and I wasn't looking for retail apocalypse, but I sure found it. The idea is that it looks like there's an incredible problem with retail right now. Over 6,700 stores shuttered in the U.S. In 2017, which beats the high from 2008, which was in the base of the financial crisis in the U.S. If you look at this chart here, you don't have to necessarily pay attention to all the details of it. It's just very telling because this is a list of retail bankruptcies that happened in the U.S. between 2015 and just last month this year. You kind of get an idea that there's a problem here with retail closures, right? And it's a very similar story around the world, as Martin pointed out. In the UK, they're dropping by 22%. There's been a tremendous drop in retail activity and number of store closures in Brazil. They're just now beginning to rebound a little bit. And even in Korea, we're seeing some pretty significant problems with retail and store closures. Everybody likes to blame store closures and retail problems on e-commerce, and it's easily done. Now, this chart is not an e-commerce chart. If you look at the legend, this chart is data traffic. It talks about data traffic per smartphone in gigabytes per month. Now, it's important to keep in mind the first 2 numbers are 2015, 2016, and then it jumps to 2022. Okay, so that curve seems a little bit misleading. But if you look at total retail sales from 2015 to 2021, and then we normalize these 2 charts this way, you see that this curve feels very similar to the other curve. This doesn't look like there's a retail apocalypse to me, because it looks like the amount of sales that are going to happen in the retail channel between 2017 and 2021 are going to double. So this doesn't feel very apocalyptic to me. So the headline is what? People are actually just shopping differently. They're not buying things. But what they're doing is they're using the technology they have available to them, their smartphones, apps, specific mobile websites, to shop differently, to be able to buy the products that they want and have them appear when they want them, in a way that they want them, and in a way that aligns better with their lifestyles. And this is what I refer to when I talk about the connected, disconnected consumer. Because for them, shopping is always on. But it's only when they think about it. So as a retailer and brand, you have to come up with some strategies and some approaches that help you be in front of these people at the right time so that they are thinking about you when they're thinking about shopping, and then when they're ready to execute on it, you're giving them a way to execute that is sensible and logical for the way that they do business. And the way that they do business is vastly different from the way it was before. And this brings us to model innovation. Now, we want to start with a definition of channel innovation, because channel innovation centers on changing how products are delivered to consumers in ways that are comfortable to them. So in the US, Starbucks has a mobile app. You can pre-order on the mobile app, walk into the store, and pick up your coffee. And I often ask people, if you're pre-ordering on an app, but you're going into the store to pick it up, who gets the win, the e-commerce team or the actual store operations team? And the answer is yes, right? Same thing with the Amazon Dash button. You're familiar with this, where you can push the button and it will automatically reorder the item that you're running out of. That's a channel innovation. Same thing with click and collect. France doesn't get enough credit, I think, for driving a lot of e-commerce innovation, but they invented click and collect decades ago. Very, very clever. But model innovation is different. Model innovation doesn't require new technology necessarily. It doesn't even need the creation of new markets. And you're delivering existing products to existing consumers or new consumers using existing technologies. The key with model innovation is this: if you had no departments to protect, no people or procedures that you had to keep in place, how would you remake the business? And the idea is that sometimes in life you have to renovate, but sometimes you've got to take the whole structure out in order to make something work better. And that's what model innovation is. Most retailers and brands are deathly afraid of model innovation. And I think that Martin was getting to this point, because model innovation is disruptive, but model innovation is where value is created for both consumers and for shareholders. Here's a really good example of model innovation that seems very, very straightforward, but it actually is all about disrupting the model. This is Jet.com, the online retailer that was spun off of Amazon that was recently purchased by Walmart. Jet.com's model is very similar to every other online retailer, except for one thing. As you shop, and as you make decisions about how you want to receive your items and how you want to pay for your items, you adjust the price, and the price goes down. So they give you an option of choosing products that are coming from the same distribution center. And then those items can be shipped to you less expensively, and they'll pass the savings on to you. So that's nice. But the real model innovation there is that Amazon and other online retailers can't algorithmically check the price and go below it, because the price is only known to the consumer as the consumer is paying, and at that point it's too late. So they've really disrupted how other retailers compete against them by doing that. And there's no reason, it's a very, very good reason why Walmart paid $3 billion for them. And Jet.com was very upfront about why they're doing it. Another really interesting one, this is a movie that was broadcast over the web, but it's actually a cochlear hearing implant test modeled as a movie. This was run in Australia, and Proximity was the media agency that came up with the idea. So the idea is, you don't want to go into a doctor to get your hearing screened, but you love watching a movie, so why can't you do this at home? Boom. Now you might think, well, is that really model innovation, or is that just being pretty clever? Because the idea came from a media agency of all places, but that's actually one of the most important things that retail and brand marketers can keep in mind, is that model innovation is a magnet for consumers, and that it can come from anywhere. 3 quick examples for you. What you're looking at here is from World War I. My company, Kimberly-Clark, came up with a cellulose product that was used to help injured soldiers on the field with their wounds. But as the war ended, the nurses realized that there was another application for this, and thus feminine hygiene as a category was born. Mentos, global candy brand, did not become a global candy brand because a rock band called Foo Fighters, that I happen to like, used them in a video. They became a global candy brand because some guy got the idea of taking a Mentos tablet, dropping it into a 2-liter bottle of Diet Pepsi, and filming it. It was one of the first memes that really hit big on YouTube, and it propelled Mentos into the stratosphere of awareness almost instantaneously. Martin showed us that really, really funny video of the bank robbers in process. But on a much more fundamental, basic level for us, banks now have apps and they let us take pictures of checks for deposit. They don't even want you to come to the branch anymore. Just take a picture and we'll take the information and deposit it, because that's all they were going to do anyway. And it's dramatically changed how the bank interacts with consumers. It's not necessarily a cost saving, but what it is it is a loyalty building capability, because it encourages a consumer to stay with that bank, because that bank is not making them go out of their way to show up to do something that they feel like they should be able to do on their own anyway. And the ability to do something on your own anyway starts increasingly in this world of mobile with search. And so that's where we're going to go right now. In order to start this off, I'm going to get a little bit technical, not too technical, but I want to talk about the differences between a search engine and a search appliance. So a search engine is like Bing, it's like Google, it's like all the similar ones that we all know about. And a search engine crawls the internet, collects the information, keeps it in an index, and then based on how you're asking for something, it will return a result to you based on some relevancy that is decided by some algorithm that is secret to them, that changes constantly, right? That's what a search engine is. A search appliance is something that you would find on a retailer's website. And the search appliance works very similarly to a search engine, except all the information within the search appliance is confined to its own inventory. So while you're looking for items on Amazon, or you're looking for items on Walmart.com or Coupang, the information you're getting back from those services actually comes from the brands who provide the products that are for sale at the retailer. Okay? For a search engine, the more people who ask for the same thing, the more that thing rises to the top of the search rank. For a search appliance, the same applies. The more people ask for the same item, the more that item rises to the top of the search rank in its category. So being popular with search matters. But we all know, as retailers and as brand builders, that being popular is not necessarily the right answer for what the consumer's looking at. We need to start to think differently about search, because search is all about visibility. In this day and age, as people are shifting their preferences away from items that you type into to items that you can poke and swipe, i.e. going away from desktop and using your phone on a more regular basis, search becomes more important, because without search, without your product coming up when someone's looking for something, you're invisible, right? And pay attention to this graphic, because this graphic is actually going to tell us something. It's not just dancing around. The idea is that people are looking to search more differently than they ever used to. I mentioned earlier about how people are shifting away from typing and into other forms of interface. You know, search is all about filling out a form. But as we move out of just typing and we move into other input types, you start to see that there's going to be a problem for retailers who are providing that information to a search engine, because they're going to rely upon the way people speak instead of the way people type. You type very differently than you talk. When you type something into a field, you may edit it before you hit send. But when you talk, you don't edit it. You say and you tend to build on what you said previously. Now, this is not a new phenomenon. Way back in 2013, 5 years ago, which is an entire eon in e-commerce terms, Wired Magazine had an article about the interfaces of the future. And they're saying we're forcing the graphical user interface into a mobile interface world. So you're basically taking what was on a larger screen on your laptop and you're turning it into a very, very small portrait device. What we need now is to be able to simply talk with our devices. Now, we have all here at this conference seen out in the main floor some interesting technologies that provide some brand new ways of interfacing with your device, right? So voice search, while new and relatively, especially to the retail world, while new, it's something that's coming. It's been coming for a little while. And in fact, you've been using this interface of the future since the day you were born, because it's just voice. From the time you started uttering words, it's been relevant to you. And the other thing about technology to keep in mind is this. Technology inception always takes a back seat to adoption. And so as soon as capabilities like Siri, Cortana, Google Assistant, and all the same, as soon as they began to find real useful application in the home and in life, it was just going to be a pipe dream. But the real challenge for retailers and brands is that they are going to have to deal with the disruption of how they provide information to each other. Because retailers and brands need to work together to keep a consumer interested in what they have to offer. Because if they don't, someone else who does offer a better capability and a more relevant way to find what they're looking for will. And what's going to happen is the nature of how you're searching for something, whether you're typing from typing something into a form field to using some kind of an augmented reality in a store to see what's happening in front of you, this is going to require a vastly different data dictionary for brands to give to retailers. And this is important because right now, on a global basis, there's a lot of fracture in the world of who's providing voice data services. You got the big ones like Google, Facebook, and Amazon. And then you have a lot of smaller ones. But who's going to actually own that? Because whoever owns that is going to be receiving a lot of data about how we ask for things. And that's what's going to ultimately end up driving search. So the real future of search is the ability for the search return itself to listen. So when you type something into a form and hit submit, what comes back to you is typically thought of as being the end of a process. It needs to be the beginning of a process. The most important thing search can do is understand that sometimes if she's asking for a trainer, a runner, and a jogger, she may be talking about the same thing, or in this case, she may be talking about 3 different things. And the search return is going to need to know that that's what she is asking for to give her the results that she's looking for. And giving her the results she's looking for brings us to radical personalization. So now why do I say radical personalization? What's radical about personalization? Well, I like to think of personalization as being the end goal of being able to master data. Now, Martin made a point about big data being sort of a meaningless term, an amorphous term in this day and age, and I think he's exactly right. But in this context, what we're talking about here today, the data is both a renewable resource and a consumable resource. I think it's the most interesting part of the periodic table of marketing terms. Data is something that is thrown off by consumer activity. When a consumer does something with their phone, it is being tracked. We know what's happening. We know where they've been. We know where they're going. And we use that information to create better experiences for them, which causes them to do more things, which then throws off more information, which then we consume to create better experiences. It's one of those situations where it's the perfect fuel because it's infinitely renewable. No matter how much of it we use, we get more of it. I like to think of this as sort of my approximation of what a marketing automation stack looks like within the context of a turbocharger, right? So when we talked about 6,800 stores closing, was that there were 6,800 stores that closed, or was it that there were 6,800 undifferentiated retail experiences that really just had to go bye-bye, right? Back in the old days, the shopkeeper knew her customers. She knew them when they came in, she asked them questions, she stocked what they wanted, and her idea of scale was as many people as she could get in her store during opening hours. But today, retail is focused very much on execution. Brands are focused very much on execution. And to Martin's earlier point, they're not as focused as they need to be on the consumer. And the problem is, when you're not listening to the consumer, you have a garbage in, garbage out problem, where you're not getting good information in or you're not getting any information in, and then it leads you to make bad business decisions, which is where you get 6,800 stores closing. Blockbuster Video is another one of these tales. Blockbuster had 9,000 shops around the US where they would rent movies and DVDs. Then Netflix came along and said, we could mail those DVDs to you. Blockbuster didn't realize that people really wanted the convenience. They didn't really care about the harshly lit stores so much. And so the idea then, Netflix, many of you may know, has further pivoted its model, and they don't even mail DVDs anymore, or although only very rarely, it's now almost pure streaming, and they become a media company and an entertainment company. That's model innovation, by the way. One of a very interesting way that you can achieve a degree of radical personalization is relative to subscription. So subscription is it sounds like it's an easy thing. We think of it sort of notionally, but it's actually very difficult because it involves disrupting an e-commerce process. So it's technologically very demanding. Consumer selects a product, sets the preferred cadence of deliveries, adds payment and shipping, and then the items are delivered and the consumer is charged according to a set schedule. Subscription is not the same as auto-replenish. Subscription comes along a schedule, regardless of need. Auto replenishment is according to need, which is much more consumer-centric. This is not a real product, but for instance, a wet wipe box that knew when it was running low and would automatically order you more, that would be an idea of auto replenishment. So the reason why subscription is a really good way to think about, is something good to think about when you think about radical personalization, is because it can tell you a lot. It can let you know the cross-sell and upsell potential across categories. It can let you know which products have good adjacencies with each other. It can also give you an opportunity to provide an incentive to a shopper to share what they're doing with you with others. But the most important thing they could do is help with list building, and I'm going to get to that in a little bit. One interesting hack that I like is I call it CRM-driven auto replenishment. And the idea is this: a consumer comes to shop. When they are ready to add something to a cart, we ask them if they want to get involved in an auto replenishment scheme. They say yes. The subscription pop-up happens, and they give us their information for contact. They don't have to provide any payment information. Then they go through and they finish their order. Then, at a given cadence, based on the product, based on what we're looking for out of that consumer, it could be informed by other CRM inputs, we send them an email with a replenishment link. All you got to do is click on the link, which you can have on your phone, and it'll go past the product detail page into the shopping cart and say, do you want to edit your order or order as is? They hit a button and boom, it's done. So it's like subscription, except it's based on us prompting the consumer. And then if the consumer decides that they're not really ready for it, they don't have to take it yet. You have the benefits of subscription without losing the personalization aspect of it. Because personalization ultimately becomes about relationship building. And whatever we can do at great scale to have one-to-one conversations is the most important thing. And the most important thing then with having one-to-one relationships is getting to the path through purchase. I don't really know why this picture was up there, but my 18-year-old daughter thought that people really like golden retrievers. But the idea about the path through purchase is this: the relationship in the marketing stack between customer relationship management, CRM, and the product detail page, the PDP. Because if the CRM is doing its job properly, and the CRM is delivering the ability for a consumer to work on a more intimate one-to-one basis with you, it will help you refine what the real job of the product detail page should be. And that is an important thing to keep in mind. The idea of CRM is that it defines these systems and approaches of establishing and extending a relationship. But the fact of the matter is that that is a very, very different thing today with mobile than it ever was before. And because we no longer have to shop in a way that the retailer wants us to shop, we can shop when we want to and where we want to. And by the way, shop doesn't necessarily mean purchase, it just means browse. It gives us an opportunity to gather more information about the consumer and to use it to deliver a better experience. So why should we start with CRM? Well, as a marketer, whether you're in a retailer or in a brand, you may feel like your highest and best use, your top priority is to grow revenue. It is not. In this day and age, with mobile driving people's behavior patterns, your most important thing is to grow your mailing list. Because if you have a large list of people who have been your customers, people who haven't but should be your customers, and others who've made themselves available to you via email or via social, you have the ability to spread your word out. And you have the ability to have more people potentially come into your store than you've ever had before. And that list becomes your organization's most valuable asset. So we talked about the product detail page's new job. What exactly are we talking about? Well, the product detail page is that online approximation of what happens when you take a product from the shelf to the front of the store. And the way it needs to change has an analogy in American football and in soccer. In American football, the action starts and stops along with the clock. Who here starts and stops their lives along with a clock? Nobody. I like European football as a better analogy. Proper football, I call it. The action runs continually, and there are goals, and there may be a very small celebration after the goals, but the clock never stops running. In e-commerce, your objective is to score as many goals as possible, but you have to start with that first goal, and the clock never stops running. And if you take that mindset, your approach to CRM and your approach to what the product detail page's real role is will change. So the conventional thinking is that a PDP is where we're converting a consumer's intent to become an actual purchase. And I don't like those words at all because I don't think they apply very well. In a retail store, when people show up, They want to buy something. They made an effort to go there. But when you're online and you're on your phone, you're not necessarily looking to convert. You have a lot of traffic that is, I'm not going to buy anything traffic. If you look at the conversion rates here compared to the desktop and tablet, there's your answer. It doesn't mean that people aren't using their phones. Who here doesn't use your phone? I see a lot of phones now. The idea is that they use their phones differently than standard retail thinking assumes that they do. And so the idea of the product detail page is to be linking a past sale to a future sale. That's why you want to grow that list. Okay, we've made it. We've come to the end. Take a moment to relax. I'm going to leave you with 4 quick thoughts. We talked about brick and mortar being ruined by e-commerce. There's no retail apocalypse. We saw what the figures were in terms of retail sales. And as Martin said, good retail wins every time. 2, the disconnected consumer notion that I've introduced to you lets you know that consumers want to be your friend, but they want to do it on their terms. They don't want an arm's length relationship anymore. We have social media showing us that consumers really are people, and they leave ratings and reviews, and they talk about your products on social when you're not there or when they think that you're not there. And so it's not consumers, because consumers is a big sea of identifiers. They're people, and if you regard them as people and you approach them as people, you have a much higher success rate with winning their hearts and minds over. Your approach as a marketer needs to evolve for these people to let you in. You have to think about them individually. You have to think about what you're able to do to attract him and her, and then be able to do it at great scale. So this is why we talked about listening at great scale and then being able to have one-to-one relationships with them. And all the tools to be able to do this exist, by the way. And a lot of them are out there on display for you to learn about. So if you're here and you're kind of resistant to dealing with a salesperson, don't be. They're there to share with you what they can do to help your business. 4, the various steps that consumers are going to go through to buy something will change. So a product detail page, I think, is going to be something that's in the past. I'm sorry, wait a minute, it already is, because you can do pretty much anything you want to in terms of e-commerce through WeChat in China. There's a lot of opportunity we have to knock down all the barriers that we put up to selling something online. And that, I think, are some of the steps that you can take to achieve success in a widely distributed shopping environment. Thank you guys very much. Really appreciate your attention. Thank you.